I started programming very early, and in a way, I started coding with Legos.
With Lego?
Yes, Legos already have this idea that you have a world that is fundamentally discrete, made out of relatively simple blocks that you can combine without trying to subdue nature, but only trying to express your thoughts. And with Legos, your ability to limit your thoughts, of course, limited by the set of building blocks you have, how many you have, what kind of arrangement I have, what properties I have, and so on. But they, in some sense, have blocks and slots. And by planning ahead, you can construct. And so there is this fundamental act of producing an expression of your ideas via construction. And when computers entered my life, that was at the age of 8 or 9, I saw a TV show about computers and programming. And I was smitten because I thought this is basically like Legos, only it's completely abstract. So you can express any thought that you want as long as you're able to translate it into a general language. And you can put anything on screen with it that you can imagine, and it can occupy any kind of space. And there is absolutely no limitation in terms of the building blocks that you've got, because you've got all of them. You just need to know how to combine them. There is absolutely the only limitation that you have is the memory of your computer, which back then was a real issue. And then, of course, the speed of the computer, which means how patient are you going to be in looking at the stuff that you are generating if it takes very slow to produce the result that you want to have. And then about a year later, I got a Commodore 64. I already had learned coding by that time, and pestered my relatives to get one to me from Western Germany, which was quite difficult back then. And I was forced to go very deep relatively quickly, because the Commodore 64 does not even have a command to make a line, and it's this basic language. And the basic language itself is relatively close to machine language. It's not that far remote in the way in which you think, because there are not that many abstractions available. It's relatively close to the metal. And when you have to learn assembler to produce faster things, you really get from the ground up and realize that at the bottom of your CPU there is an automaton. And this automaton allows you to build a representational language on it, in which you can express anything that you want to the degree that you actually understand it. So it's a tool to develop your thoughts in an extremely rigorous manner and test them, but it's also a tool to build anything that you want in this virtual world of the computer. And there were some concepts coming from this world of the computer that didn't make a lot of sense to me. In the world of mathematics, for instance, I didn't really understand what space is. I understood that space is a reference that our mind is building, because it's basically, we would say today that we are training a neural network into our mind that is basically a black box. That is, it's not completely a black box. We have some idea on how V1, V2, V4, and so on represent stuff and how they're related to each other. But from the inside, we don't see any of that. Right? We notice that there are textures at some level, there are geometries that are moving, and we can start paying attention to how our mind is constructing a space. But it's basically just a machine learning tool that is trying to make sense of an extremely heterogeneous world. And so when I try to grasp the concepts that mathematicians use for geometry, they seem to be quite opaque to me, because they're actually quite difficult to express in a computational language from the ground up. It's not easy to construct geometry. It's much easier to construct logic. And so this intuition that you get in school that geometry is easy, because your brain already knows how to do it and you just need to refer to it, and mathematicians already have these intuitions and they seem to be platonically given. And then, on the other hand, you have this logical language from which you can build geometry, but it's actually hard work. And then realizing actually the hard work has been done by your brain in a way that you couldn't see, and it's not given. And algebra is actually much more easy than geometry and much more fundamental. And the true algebra is, in some sense, code that can express anything, and some of what it expresses, a tiny bit of it, is geometry. And geometry happens to be the way in which we model the visual world. And it's an important part of how we model reality, because it's grounding our symbolic representations. Right? But it's necessary to understand both. And I wish that mathematics or philosophy would have given me an inroad into this.